Okay, in this video I am going to explain you some of the DB options that were not created when I actually showed you how to create a database. Whenever actually you are creating a database or whenever you want to create a database, you should be aware of other options that are available, okay, and what the options you can do when the database already exists. So not only when you want to create, but when the database already exists. So let's go and click to the right click and select properties, and we will go to the options menu and we will see what are the options available and what do they mean. We are not going to actually refer to all the options, only some of the few important options we are going to deal with. There we are, and let's go to the option part of it. Okay, let's start with the first thing first. Okay, let's show the recovery model equals to full. What happens if you set the recovery model to full, and what are the other options? The second one is the bulk locked and the third one is simple. When you set the recovery model to the full, okay, you can actually recover the full database to the certain point in time, means to the last moment of the time, not to the last transaction log backup. A full recovery plan actually allows you to log in all the details of the select into bulk operations, create index. While when you say to the bulk log, if you choose the option of bulk log will do it to the minimum level. And the other thing is that about the bulk log is that the bulk log will allow you to recover up to the last transaction log and not up to the last point in the time when your database failed. While in the simple database recovery model, you cannot back up the transaction log. Okay, there is no transaction log, and the transaction log is truncated as soon as you back it up. Database. The other thing is that you can have a differential backup with a simple log, simple what you call recovery model, but then you cannot have the transaction log backup with this option. Okay, so far so clear. I am very clear about it. Okay, the difference between the full, bulk log and simple. Usually people will use always a full or bulk log. Simple is very rarely used. Okay, but in the simple situation you can use a simple database recovery model until and unless you are want a database up to the last point. Okay, so go to the full one. And if you are okay, you do not mind actually having to the last point, but up to the last transaction log backup, so go for the bulk locked. Okay. Now let's go down, take it one by one options. Okay, here is the how to create a database from the single user to the multiple user and the restricted user. I can change this option from here anywhere. Single user means only a single user will be get connected, and other user will be dropped. All the connection would be dropped. Okay. If there are connection there, that would be dropped. Okay, multi-user is the default option of the access, where many people who have the permission to log in the database and have the permission to the tables in the database can log into and use the database. Restricted is limited only to the few, that is the database administrator, that is DB owner, DB creator and system admin. Okay, these are the people who are actually allowed to have access in the restricted mode. Okay, now as you can see, I can go and change the options from here, and if I say select OK, the database changes into the different mode. Okay, I'm not going to change any of them. You can do it whatever you want, feel like it. I'm just going to show you where exactly it happens. Okay. The other options is, let's go to the other option, one of the other option. Now when I will come with the transact SQL, and then I will explain it to you how to do it with the transact SQL also. Okay, right now. Okay, let's go to the other option known as auto close. See, the auto close is the first option. It is set to the false. What happens with the auto close is that whenever your database of the last user actually logs out, the database automatically shuts down. Okay, that is what it means by the auto close. Not use this thing in the production server in a very big organization, because the overheads of the restarting the database and the time needed to restart the database is very big. It should not be done. It can actually take a lot of time away from your schedule. Okay, now let's go to the next option. Let's go to the this option that's known as create a statistic. What a create a statistics does, actually it creates a statistic for your tables. This is what the SQL refers and actually uses in a query. Okay, it's always better to have it on. Okay, and the update statistics, what does it do? It keeps on updating the statistics. And what are the statistics? What do you mean by static? Okay, whenever there's a lot of insert, delete, update performed on your database, so the statistics is getting updated by the SQL server. It actually affects if the SQL server uses it for the query. Okay, and if you set it off, it will actually affect your query performance. So it is always set to the true. Okay, then there is auto shrink database. Now this is set to the false. This should not set to be true, actually, because it actually will bring down your production server to a very slow speed. Do not try this thing options. But what does it option means? Okay, suppose if you created a database, okay, suppose 500 MB, and then and the database went on increasing. Okay, now database shrink option would work only and only when your database space is 25% free. Only then it will shrink the database and the log files, otherwise it won't. Now suppose if you have a database of 500 MB with the initial sizes, and if you expect it to shrink to that 500 size to less than it, it will not shrink it. Okay, it will shrink only what was extended after 500 MB. So the last option till it will shrink is till the initial size of the database what you created it. Okay, you should not use this option. Okay, it will have an effect of slow down performance on your production server. Okay, use cursor on commit enabled. What does it mean? It means that once you actually commit a transaction, the cursor would close automatically. By default it is false, and it should remain false. The thing is that it should be controlled by the programmers, and it should not be controlled by a database itself. The thing is, what's the benefit of it? The benefit is that if the cursor is not closed even when committed, then you can reread the whole cursor. But the problem is that it can lock the other users, because the commit actually releases the lock on the database, on the tables. That's the disadvantage it has. But usually it is always better to have it get it controlled by the programmers and to get it programmed by the code. Okay, controlled by the code. Okay. Now what does the default cursor mean? Default cursor is global. Okay, when you create a local cursor, all the local code would be able to access your local cursor. Okay, but if you create a global cursor, then it is accessible from any connection from any other user. Okay, any user can access the global connection. Okay, now if I leave it as it is, okay, whenever I create a cursor, the name, if I do not specify whether it is local or global, the default would be taken as global, because this is what default means. If I change it to the local here, then the default actually would be local. Okay, as you can see. Okay. Now this is NC null enabled. Okay, default. So what is NC null enabled? Okay, suppose if I create a table and I do not specify whether that column is null or not null. Okay, and if I set it true, okay, then all the column that I do not specify would be set to the null, enabled. Okay, and if I set it to false, it will not be enabled. The default is false, leave it as it is. Okay, now let's move to the arithmetic about enabled. Okay, this is usually used, it is false. This, if set to the true, what will happen is that if there is a division by the 0 and the result or something like arithmetic, okay, there is a division error, query gets aborted. That's it. It is actually set to the false. Let it remain set to the false, because you can control the code from inside the code. You need not control it from directly from here. Okay. Okay, there are one or two more options. I will deal with it, and then I will shut down this topic here of the options. Okay, this is a recursive trigger enabled. Okay, usually set to the false. Do not enable it to true. The only difference is that it allows your trigger to be actually recursively called, which may actually create a problem when debugging the code. And then there is a numeric roundabout. Okay, that's actually you can set it to true or false. It is set to the false. You can always again control it from the computer program. Not a problem at all. Okay. The encryption enabled is false. Okay, that's very rarely used. If you want to enable it true. Okay, that's it. Okay, these are the options. In the next video I will show you how to do it with the same thing with the SQL. Okay.